What's up everybody, Rob here. So I'm going to be doing something a little bit different today. I'm going to be making a reaction video. Why am I making a reaction video? Because I can. And also I just figured out how to do it and I figured I'd have a little bit of fun with it. You know, stuff that people have been doing for the better part of a decade, I just learned how to do, well, last week. So I'm going to be looking at the American Revolution from Oversimplified, Part 1 and Part 2. Part 2 is going to be coming in a separate video a little bit down the road. And, yeah, this is not going to turn into a reaction channel. I just figured I'd, do it for the fun of it, just because, why not? And, yeah, that's pretty much it. I just want to point out that, yes, I'm perfectly aware that my camera is pretty terrible. I'm using a laptop, and the built-in camera here is, it's a second-rate laptop. I got a second-rate camera. I got to make do with what I have, and I'm way too cheap to buy a good one, so we're just going to have to make do. And there you go. So, any case, Oversimplified, I have seen some of their videos previously. The videos on the French Revolution, they were very good. And also, the Three Kingdoms of China, that was also very good, very funny, and very informative. So, I figured I'd, take a look at the American Revolution. And, yeah, that's pretty much it. So, without any further ado, American Revolution, Oversimplified, Part 1. Here we go. Oh, and I'm going to be stopping along the way just to give my commentary and, that sort of thing. So that's just how I do things, and, yeah, make of that whatever you will. Okay, here we go.
Holy smokes! Christopher Columbus, that is no way to address the King and Queen of Spain. What is wrong with you? Okay, so you know how we're looking for a new trade route to India, right? Right. And the Earth is round, right? Right. So I'm thinking we can just say...
Yeah, everybody believed the Earth was round. The idea that the Earth was flat, that's just a myth. Everybody who thought about these things knew that the Earth was, in fact, round, so, yeah.
The other way around the planet, right? Yeah. So I set sail, right? And I reach India, right? Right. Wrong. I did not reach India. I did not. Alright. No, alright.
Christopher Columbus, as far as I remember, he went to his deathbed believing he actually did make it to Asia. Whether it was India or not, I'm not sure, but yeah, I'm pretty sure he believed he made it to Asia and did not, in fact, find a new continent. Even after other people said, no, this is a new continent. He's like, no, really, I made it to India, but whatever.
Get to the point. Did you know there's a whole nother freaking continent out there? Okay, and you think I should care about this? Why? Oh, I'm sorry, did I forget to mention there's gold everywhere?
Bit of an overstatement.
Gold? Columbus landed in Central America in October 1492, and he had the time of his life. And by that I mean he went on a huge theft and murder spree. He stole gold, jewelry, people, and a hammock. And then he returned to show off all of his riches, including a few previously undiscovered items, such as tobacco, the pineapple, turkeys.
Anybody who puts pineapple on pizza needs to be thrown out of a helicopter. I don't make the rules, I'm sorry, that's just how it is.
And a hammock. Now I know what you're thinking, but oversimplified, Columbus didn't discover America, the Vikings did. And you'd be part...
Well, yes, the Vikings did discover it beforehand, but the Native Americans actually discovered it beforehand because they came over from Asia across the Bering Strait, the land bridge that was there. So, yeah, I think they meant the first Europeans to discover North America, but, yeah, okay, make of that whatever you will. And the Vikings, they did settle, but they never really did much with it, so, they were here, but who cares?
Partially right. In the 11th century, Leif Erikson was the first European to land in America.
Yes.
But hey,
if
you love Vikings so much, then why don't you check out today's sponsor? Vikings War of Clans is a mobile game that was inspired by the famous strategy and RPG games of the 90s like Age of Empires and Civilization.
Age of Empires was a great game. Civilization, I was always terrible at.
Joining a clan and going to war.
I was terrible at Age of Empires too, but it was
Vikings
fun.
War of Clans is for you. And what makes its world so addictive is that more than 20 million online players are constantly changing the way the game evolves by never-ending fighting over resources, forging new alliances, and competing in live events. Support my channel by downloading Vikings for free, only from my links in the description box below. And get a special bonus of 200 gold coins.
Yeah, check these guys out if you want to help support the channel,
My Vikings clan under my nickname, Oversimplified.
Help them out. They do good work here.
Oh yeah. Columbus, time of his life, hammock. And suddenly the race was on to explore and conquer the new world. After a couple centuries of warring with the natives and each other, the European powers had claimed quite a lot of land, including this area, which both the English and the French claimed as theirs. One day the French said, I'm gonna build some forts along here, and the English were like, could you not? And the French said, sorry, but no, I could not. And they went ahead and built their forts, which pissed off the English, so they sent an up-and-coming British lieutenant colonel by the name of George Washington.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's about to kick off the 7 Years' War. Basically, this whole thing was a giant powder keg ready to go off, and Washington would provide the spark.
Force of British troops and Native Americans. After a short battle, the French commander said, all right, we surrender. Okay, boys, pack it up. There's surrender. Oh, sorry.
I just love the matter of fact way they did that. Basically, he was a Virginia militia colonel, which is more or less equivalent to a colonel in the Virginia National Guard, and he's basically put in charge of policy during this very chaotic point. Basically, like a National Guard colonel being in charge of policy during the Cuban Missile Crisis. You know, you got these two great powers about to go to war with one another, like they're that close, and Washington kind of gets thrown into the middle of it. So yeah, he's way beyond his pay grade. A lot of people say that he was just incompetent during this whole era, or during this particular incident. Yeah, that argument can be made, but really it's just something way, way beyond him. And he just kind of got caught into this scenario, so yeah.
Sorry, was I not meant to split his head open with a tomahawk?
No, you were.
Don't worry. It's not like this will start a 7-year-long major global conflict. And what happened next was a 7-year-long major global conflict, which Great Britain won.
Yeah, it was actually it was a world war. It was fought in North America, it was fought in Europe, and it was fought in Asia too, in India. So it was I think it was possibly one of the first major global conflicts. I don't know if it's the first world war, but it was one of the first. So
peace negotiations, Spain gave up Florida, while France gave up all of its territories in North America. But Britain's victory came at a cost, a £60 million cost. They were now broke, in a lot of debt, and had to come up with some way to repay it. So they went to the colonies and said, okay, listen up. So a huge part of the war was spent protecting you from the French, and now we have no money because of it. So...
what's your point?
I'm not sure what you're saying here. Okay, so we spent a lot of money protecting you from the French, right? Right. And now we're broke. That certainly is a pickle. Listen to me. We spent all of our money protecting you, and now we need money. Can you please pay us back some money?
Of course not.
No.
Yes,
Okay, we're just going to go ahead and tax you. In 1764,
taxation is theft.
Britain introduced the Sugar Act, forcing the colonists to import sugar and
It's a violation of the non-aggression principle. There, I said it.
molasses exclusively from the British and to pay duties on them. Then a year later, they introduced the extremely controversial Stamp Act, and it worked a little something like this.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, shopkeep. Hello, Mr. Bungleberry. Here's the deed for your new shack. Stamp. That'll be 3 pence, please. Wait, what was that? It's the new tax. I get a stamp on any paper or documentation
Pretty much,
I
yeah.
make, and you have to pay for it.
Yeah, like everything that was stamped on newspapers, deeds, broadsheets, pretty much anything. If there was any kind of printing on it, there would be a tax on it.
Would you like to see this pamphlet that explains everything?
Yep, pamphlets,
Yes, please.
yep.
Okay.
They would be taxed.
Stamp. 2 pence, please. This is awful. You know what? Just give me a deck of cards so I can go gamble my pain away. Okay. No.
Yeah, even playing cards, yeah.
Don't do it. Stamp. Obviously, the colonists were like, hey, my dudes, this new tax legislation right here, this is BS. Until now, they had enjoyed relative freedom to rule themselves, and now suddenly Britain was asserting its control. They were especially unhappy because they didn't have any representatives in the parliament that was levying taxes on them. So they...
The idea of taxation without representation is a bit of an overstatement. Benjamin Franklin, before the Revolution, he went to Britain as basically a spokesman for the colonies. Officially, he was there for Pennsylvania, but he unofficially spoke for everybody. And he was told, whatever you do, do not accept representation in Parliament, because no matter what happens, we're going to be completely outvoted, because the colonies had a very small population. We're going to be completely outvoted, and then we won't have anything to complain about. You know, we won't have any grounds to stand on. So the idea of taxation without representation is really more of a slogan than anything else. So, yeah, make of that whatever you will.
protested. Orators gave fiery speeches. British goods were boycotted, and anyone loyal to the British found themselves increasingly harassed. The whole thing actually began to take quite a toll on British business, and after just a couple years, the British were forced to repeal the Stamp Act. But we still desperately need money. What should we do? We could try taxing the colonies. Great idea. Wait, didn't we literally just try that and it failed miserably? Man, look at me. I look fabulous. Have you ever seen such a handsome boy? No siree, Georgie. No.
Yeah, George III really wasn't a tyrant. He expected not the love of his subjects, but at least their loyalty, which, can't say that that's too much to ask for. And he was not tyrannical, American propaganda notwithstanding.
Wait, you're the handsomest, smartest, most popular king that ever lived, and everybody likes you. You're doing such a good job. Your Majesty? Oh, you're still here. Get the hell out. So in 1766, the British made a declaration saying, we can do what we want because we're in charge and you can all go suck it. Then
Pretty
they
much,
levied a whole bunch of new taxes on the Americans via import duties. Glass? There's a tax for that. Lead? There's a tax for that. Paper? Tea? Oil? There's a tax for that. And once again, the Americans boycotted British goods, British business felt the pinch, and the British had to back down. All right.
Yeah, one thing I just want to point out that a lot of times people would have the boycott was actually to save their own economics. how am I putting this? Especially in the southern colonies, there was a culture of conspicuous consumption where they basically had to show that they were wealthy by spending a lot of money and having lots of stuff. George Washington was massively in debt. Thomas Jefferson, when he died, he was like, I think something like $100,000 in debt, which is like several $1,000,000 in debt, but in today's money. And honestly, people were just going in debt left, right, and center. And this boycott on British goods was actually a way for them to save money. It's like, I'm not spending money on stuff because I'm trying to, I'm protesting against the unjust treatment of, Parliament and these taxes. These taxes are unjust, so therefore I'm boycotting goods. But really, it's like, no, I'm out of money, and I gotta recoup some of my losses here. So make of that again whatever you will.
This is ridiculous. They're my colonies, and I have to be able to assert my control. Repeal all the new taxes except for the one on tea. Also send 1,000 troops to Boston to take control. Oh, and make the colonists pay for them. And as British troops arrived, the tension in Boston was palpable. You could cut it with a knife, and it was all about to come to a head. On March 5th, a band of local patriots began heckling a British guard at the customs house. More and more Americans joined in the heckling, while more British troops turned up in support of their comrade. Snowballs were thrown at the British. The snowballs turned to rocks, the rocks to oyster shells. The soldiers, outnumbered, panicked. One thing leads to another, and you can see where this is going.
Boston Massacre.
5 civilians were killed. The Patriot press throughout the colonies declared the Boston Massacre an...
Yeah, this engraving here, this was done by Paul Revere, who was pretty famous. I'm sure you've heard of that guy. And all things considered, the British, I'd have to say, were pretty justified in their actions. I mean, having rocks thrown at you and oyster shells, which will cut you open. Those things are pretty dangerous. Having them thrown at you, and then I think somebody slipped and fell, or got knocked off balance, and a shot was fired, and then once that shot was fired, then all the other British, the British opened up, and I can't say that I entirely blame them for this. So yeah, of course, Patriot propaganda played it up as a massacre when really it's like kind of like you throw stuff at a bunch of armed people. I mean, like, what do you expect to happen?
Unwarranted crime committed against the people of Boston by the cruel British, and the anger continued to grow. A British revenue schooner that ran aground in Rhode Island was burned by the locals. When it came to light that the governor of Massachusetts supported the suppression of the colonists, his house was burned by the locals. And next,
just keep burning
the colonists
stuff.
would set their sights on the remaining tax on tea. On December 16, 1773, a band of patriots known as the Sons of Liberty, disguised themselves as Native Americans, marched down to Boston Harbor, boarded a British merchant ship loaded with tea, and in front of thousands of spectators, threw nearly 10,000 pounds worth of tea overboard. The British were disgusted, and they punched...
Yeah, this was actually government property, so it wasn't just like, okay, they threw a bunch of tea into a harbor. This was, I think it's like equivalent today of like many millions of dollars worth of British government property that was destroyed in this particular event. And there were actually other events too. Boston Tea Party is one of the biggest one. There's actually one not far from here. I think it was Greenwich, New Jersey. They got a bunch of tea and they burned it, which I guess this case it's a bit more effective. Well, it depends, because you're supposed to throw tea in water, so I don't know. Whatever. Any case, this was more than just a simple, okay, we're throwing tea in a harbor, like a simple protest. This was actually like, destruction of government property. So the British took this exceedingly seriously.
Punished Massachusetts with a vengeance. They dissolved its General Assembly, revoked their charter, and sent 3,000 more troops to occupy the city.
Yeah, they're cracking down.
Boston and Massachusetts were now essentially under the direct rule of Great Britain. And oh boy, were the people pissed. The other colonies saw what was happening and worried they might be next. So they called a brain trust to decide what to do. 56 delegates from 12 colonies gathered and met in Philadelphia at the First Continental Congress, and the roll call read like a who's who of America's finest thinkers. I'm talking lawyers extraordinaire Johnny A. and Johnny J., experienced military commander George Washington, businessman and future alcoholic beverage Samuel Adams.
I don't drink beer, but as far as I can tell, Samuel Adams is watery garbage, so make of that, whatever your opinion of it is. I don't drink anyway, but think of the generation, like, look at all these are some of the greatest people in history, all gathered at the same place and time. I mean, that's, must have been incredible to have been there.
Orator, Patty H., guy who married a rich lady, Big J. Dickinson. And while they weren't present at the first Congress, soon names like James Madison, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and much later Alexander Hamilton.
Yeah, some of the greatest thinkers of all time.
The question now, though, was what to do about the British. After much bitter debate and disagreement, they eventually agreed on an amazing solution. They would simply ask the British to stop. Can you stop? No. It didn't work. Okay, then tell the local militias to start arming and be ready in a minute's notice.
I think that was the Olive Branch
And
petition.
across the colonies, these Minutemen stood ready for the beginning of the American Revolutionary War. Now, having your colonies in open rebellion is one thing. Once they start arming themselves, that's when it really hits the fan. So British General Thomas Gage ordered 700 troops from Boston out into the rebel-controlled Massachusetts countryside to destroy stores of arms and ammunition held by the rebels in Concord. The British set out in the middle of the night. Patriots, including Paul Revere, rode ahead to warn that the British were coming, giving the
Paul Revere, there he is again, very famous individual. The reason why he's famous is because of his ride, and the only reason why he's famous is because it happened to, the name Revere happens to rhyme, and Longfellow put his name into a poem. There are actually other people whose names I actually forget, yes, I'm sure if I'm told I will be reminded of them because I used to know them. They actually did a lot more, and they actually warned a lot more people, and were actually way more effective in gathering up the Minutemen and the militia. So, the reason why we remember Paul Revere is because his name happened to rhyme and was immortalized in a poem, such as The Fickle Nature of Fate. And we got an ad coming in 1 second.
rebels time to prepare.
Oh, it's from Hulu. Wu-Tang, really? Not a Wu-Tang fan. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Wu-Tang. Sorry, I'm not a rap fan.
In Lexington, as the sun began to rise, they faced off against each other, and in the confusion, somebody shot first. The shot heard around the world marked the beginning of the American War of Independence. The rebels were outnumbered and had to fall back to Concord as the British split up to search for rebel supplies. However, more and more Patriot rebels kept showing up, and this time it was the British who were outnumbered as more fighting kicked off in Concord. The most professional army in the world was forced to flee back to Boston at the hands of local, poorly trained militiamen, and all along the British route back to Boston, Patriot rebels continued to gather and open fire on the retreating British. When the British reached Boston, the rebel militia surrounded them. Boston and the British were now under...
the whole way through Concord, they were basically just harassed along the road the whole way there, and this is pretty much the first opening shots. There's some debate over whether Lexington or Concord is the actual start of the Revolution. Some say because Lexington, the Patriots, maybe the shot heard around the world was fired by the Patriots, but there was no real resistance there at that point. And that Concord was the actual opening of the resistance. So there's some argument there. I think it goes to Lexington because, you gave the attempt. You get points for effort. But the British were harassed the whole way back, and they were sieged up and bottled up in Boston.
Siege, as small land and naval skirmishes continued around the city. And the British would suffer another embarrassing blow, this time in upstate New York. Colonel Benedict Arnold concocted a plan to take the British stronghold Fort Ticonderoga, which held a large amount of guns and ammunition. He set off towards the fort alone, hoping to recruit men along the way, when he came across the Green Mountain Boys, led by Ethan Allen, who has
also a furniture company.
Turned out had the exact same plan he did. So they decided to work together. But I'm in charge. No, 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 I'm in charge. This went on for some time, until the Green Mountain Boys threatened to go home, and Arnold had to concede. The group raided the fort at night while the Redcoats were asleep, and they caught them completely by surprise, taking the fort and all of its munitions with almost no resistance. Wow.
The British commander, I think, was actually in bed, and he woke up with a bunch of Patriots with fixed bayonets, standing over him. It was like, hey, dude, we're in charge now. So, just completely caught flat-footed with that one.
Oh, great job, Ethan. Very impressive. By the way, what happened to that other guy we sent to take the fort? Who? Benedict Arnold. Never heard of him. Ouch.
True. Yeah, more or less.
What the fuck? Nobody knew what was going on. The colonies were in open rebellion, and for now, they even seemed to be winning. So King George fired General Gage, replaced him with General William Howe, and ordered the rebellion to be put down immediately. Okay, the British are definitely going to retaliate for all of this, so we should probably put together a proper army. First, we need to pick a commander-in-chief, and I think we can all agree that that job should go to the man, the myth, the legend, George Washington. My friends, I am humbled and honored that you would consider me for such an important role. I did not expect for this. All right, you've been showing up in a military uniform every day for the last 10 months. We all know you wanted this, so cut the crap, George.
Pretty much, yeah.
Dude.
He did. He showed up in his militia colonel uniform for
up to Boston
months.
to take command of the newly established Continental Army, just as the British made their first major attempt to break the siege. They made plans to take the high ground on Bunker Hill, but spies warned the Continentals of the British plans, so they fortified Bunker Hill and set up defensive positions on nearby Breed's Hill. The day of the battle came, and as the British advanced, a barrage of Continental gunfire was opened up on them. Twice they tried to climb the hill, twice they were pushed back. The battle lasted 3 hours until the Continentals finally ran out of ammunition and had to retreat, allowing the British to take the hill. While technically a British victory, they suffered nearly 1,000 casualties to the Continentals' 400. The colonists showed the British that this wasn't just a rebellion, it was war. And
that's a recurring problem throughout the American Revolution, and the Patriot cause was oftentimes under-equipped and underfunded. Especially as far as gunpowder was concerned. There was only one, as far as I remember, one location that actually manufactured gunpowder within the colonies. Most of it had to be brought in, previously again, had to be brought in from Britain, but that's obviously cut off. So they had to rely on captured British supplies or stuff that was brought in by the French, the Dutch, and the Spanish. But yeah, gunpowder was always a perpetual issue with them throughout the entire war.
They were ready for it, but one thing they weren't sure about was why they were fighting. Well, some radicals were starting to throw around the I word. Most hoped to eventually repair their relationship with Great Britain. So they sent a letter to King George saying, "Hey man, looks like things aren't going your way. Remove the taxes and let's be friends. I'm gonna kick your
Is that a fidget
ass.
spinner?
Send that to the colonies.
Really?
Your Majesty, your handwriting is terrible. Are you sure? Just do it." What does it say? He's gonna lick my... Gross. So for the remainder of the year, small engagements continued to occur around the colonies. The British burned down the towns of Falmouth, Massachusetts and Norfolk, Virginia as revenge for earlier anti-British incidents. These actions played right into the hands of patriot propaganda. Overseas, the British were seen as brutes, and the French and Spanish would soon begin sending supplies to the rebel cause. During this time, there was also minor fighting going on between patriot and loyalist militias in the southern colonies. Benedict Arnold was still on a mission to win some personal glory for himself, so he headed up an attempt to invade Canada in a two-pronged attack. The Continentals managed to capture some British forts and the city of Montreal, but a harsh snowstorm with some smallpox on the side saw them defeated and pushed back at Quebec City, and they were forced to retreat all the way to Fort Ticonderoga. Speaking of which, remember all those guns and ammunition? Well, this guy's got a plan for what to do with them. He uses oxen to drag 120,000 pounds of artillery for 2 months through the harsh winter, 300 miles all the way to Washington and his Continental army surrounding Boston. Boom. Washington's got himself some big guns, which is fortunate.
Yeah, Henry Knox, kind of one of the unsung heroes. I mean, nobody really talks about him all that much. The guy was well over 300 pounds, so he was just a massive individual. He was a former bookseller. And, yeah, he was completely self-taught. Basically, of all the books that he sold, some of them were on military, well, how to run a military. And he basically read them and taught himself how to work how to run a military campaign and how to transport artillery and all that stuff. And, yeah, just completely self-taught. Very remarkable individual. Also, 300 pounds. Fat dude.
Because up until now his army had been suffering through the cold winter, not knowing when the siege would end. Now, they could make a move. Washington wanted to launch a full assault on the city, but his junior officers felt the British were too fortified, and to his credit, Washington was great at hearing and taking on board the ideas of others. Instead, the Continentals worked through the night, setting the guns up on Dorchester Heights, overlooking the city, and when dawn broke and the British saw the guns, they knew they were toast. Their positions were completely exposed. It was checkmate. They had no choice but to abandon the city. 120 ships carried 9,000 redcoats and 2,000 loyalists away to an unknown fate, and Washington...
Yeah, this whole thing was actually a bluff on the part of the Patriots. Like I said before, they had perpetual problems with gunpowder, and this was no exception. The guns had no gunpowder, so they were in a position to completely bombard the British and wipe them out that way, but they had no powder to use, and they couldn't really have any sort of sustained fire from them. So it was completely a bluff. Now, that being said, the British were actually very impressed, and by impressed I mean somewhat terrified, that the colonists were able to put together earthworks basically overnight, like the Dorchester Heights. They had earthwork. There was basically nothing there the night before, and then the next day there's earthworks with these entrenchments and gun emplacements and other fortifications. Just basically sprang. Like, these people are hardcore. Like, these people are super industrious, and they're capable of putting this together overnight. I mean, that's, from the British perspective, absolutely terrifying.
Washington had his first victory of the war. Washington then moved his army to New York, knowing that when the British returned, they would probably land there. In the meantime, a friendly-looking old man by the name of Thomas Paine had written and published a pamphlet called Common Sense, in which he advocated for total independence from Great Britain. It spread across the colonies like wildfire, and to this day remains the best-selling title in America. It was read aloud in taverns and meeting halls, and brought the idea of independence into the mainstream. Congress began to seriously consider the idea. Thomas Jefferson was selected to write up an official Declaration of Independence, and he went hard, writing that all men are created equal, with certain inalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Jefferson also had help. He had John Adams and Benjamin Franklin there in the editing process. What was the opening line? We hold these truths to be self-evident. Jefferson initially wrote, were sacred and undeniable, and Franklin said, make it self-evident. It sounds just better that way, I guess. But yeah, so it was Jefferson's document. it was Jefferson's work, but Adams and Franklin were heavily involved in the editing process.
Of course, Jefferson had over 100 slaves, but we
True.
don't have to talk about that. On the 2nd of July,
That is
Congress
absolutely true,
voted
yes.
unanimously in favor of independence, and John Adams declared that the 2nd of July would go down as the most remembered day in American history. Then a couple days later, independence actually came into effect.
Yeah.
The United States of America was born. There was no turning
America!
back now. The Americans tore down a statue of King George in New York and melted him down into 42,000 musket balls. To the British, it was treason, and if the king had
Prequel memes. Yeah. Oh, you gotta get those prequel memes in.
his way, Washington and all of Congress would be hung. Speaking of the British, guess who's back? The king sent an intimidating force of 130 warships and 25,000 men to New York. Washington knew that taking on the most powerful military in the world wouldn't be easy. The British set up camp on Staten Island as the Americans dug into defensive positions
the New York
around Brooklyn
campaign.
Heights, waiting for an attack to come. But the British just waited, wearing down their opponent's nerve while building their own strength. At one point, they launched a big scary artillery barrage and then said, you know, if I was you right now, I'd probably sue for peace. But Washington told them to shove it. The Americans kept holding out for what was coming, and when they finally hit, they hit hard. 15,000 British troops approached the American position, and the two sides fired on each other in massive rows. But what the Americans didn't realize was they were only fighting a decoy. The main British force was going around to flank the Americans from behind, and when they arrived, they inflicted heavy casualties. The Americans panicked and retreated back to Brooklyn Heights, where they then found themselves trapped between the British army and the river. It looked as though the war was already lost, but luckily, instead of attacking, the British decided to dig in for a siege, and then a thick fog set in, allowing Washington's army to escape across the river unimpeded. The British continued to chase and engage the
That escape over the river was one of the most famous events of the early parts of the Revolution, and the Patriots praised it as a combination of the incredible discipline and capability of the army being able to retreat right from under the British nose, conduct water crossing under those circumstances. However, water crossings and retreats don't win battles and wars, which, I figured you all understood that. Also, because like they said, there was a fog coming in, so they said, oh, this is proof that God is on our side. See, he put this fog out so that our troops can escape from the British. The big thing here that my takeaway from this entire campaign, it was an utter disaster. From beginning to end. But the thing is that General Howe really did not have a killer instinct. He had the colonists on the ropes here, and he could have just, charged right in and really taken them out at multiple points throughout this. I think there were 5 battles in the whole New York campaign, and the colonists lost every one of them. And the thing is, Howe was in a position multiple times to smash the colonists, and he didn't do it. He actually, I wouldn't go as far as to say he was a Patriot sympathizer, but he certainly did not consider them to be enemies. He considered the colonists to be his fellow countrymen who were simply led astray by firebrands and demagogues and these fiery speakers, and they just need to be brought back in the fold. Just slap them around a little bit and let them know the error of their ways, and let's not be too harsh on them. So there were many times the American cause could have been snuffed out if Howe had just gone for the jugular, and he refused to do so.
The Americans out Manhattan, and the Americans suffered defeat after defeat after defeat. It was a disaster. Washington's leadership was called into question, as thousands of American POWs were left.
Oh, I just want to point out, too, that General Howe also was slowed down because he was having an affair with a certain Mrs. Loring. He was having more fun with her than actually, running the war. Make of that whatever you will. Must have been a remarkable individual. So, thank you, Mrs. Loring, for being you and saving the American cause.
To rot as traitors. Washington's army fled through New Jersey all the way down to Pennsylvania. Rarely had an army been so badly beaten, yet survived to fight another day.
Okay, so that is it for part 1. Very interesting, very funny. I did enjoy it, and I'm going to be doing part 2 eventually, in the next couple days or so. Any case, very interesting. I did enjoy it greatly. So, that's pretty much it. So please hit the like and subscribe button. More videos coming out whenever I get around to it. And have a good day. Or don't have a good day. Your adults, have any kind of day you want. See you later.